All right, Austin, whenever you're ready, Brijesh, you want to kick off the meeting. As people
Okay.
come in, I will admit them in, and we are recording, just FYI, everybody. And thanks for everyone for coming today.
All right. Thanks, Peter. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our quarterly or biannual South Florida Stroke Coalition meeting. Hope everyone and their families have been safe over the past week with the hurricane and the after effects. And sending well wishes to everybody, especially on the Gulf Coast. I'd like to wait a couple of minutes just to allow more people to log on. The agenda for today's meeting, as you all may have seen in the Zoom invite, is to learn more about some of the pre-hospital technologies. Specifically, we're fortunate to have some excellent and innovative companies present. One from Viz.ai. Daniel D'Amore is going to present on some of the pre-hospital features that Viz is working on. And for those of you, I'm sure all of you are familiar, but just in case, Viz is a artificial intelligence software company for automated detection. Initially, they started out for LVO detection, large vessel occlusions, and have expanded their feature set since then. And we also have from Mind Rhythm, which is a pre-hospital technology company that is going to be presented by Robert Dunn on a innovative technology around LVO detection using EEG. So our goal with the SFSC is to continue to learn about new technologies as they come to the horizon and see how we can use our tri-county consortium to implement these technologies in the field with buy-in from EMS, especially if there is potential impact to improve stroke care and timeliness of stroke care due to the nature of the disease, and achieve better and better outcomes. So I think if everyone feels comfortable starting, we looks like have about 34, 35 people. And then Peter, you can certainly send out the video recording for anyone who didn't get a chance to join. So we'll go ahead and start with Daniel, and then Carolina Gutierrez from University of Miami, after we learn about some of the pre-hospital technologies, is going to present the progress on the data transparency with the regional dashboards and some other projects that our EMS coalition has been working on with their team. So Daniel, I'll pass it to you.
Great, thank you so much. And thanks for giving us the opportunity to chat with you guys today. It's very important for us, obviously, not just with stroke, but with every hyperacute disease state. We're focusing on stroke right now because it's a stroke meeting, but recognizing that EMS has way more to do than just stroke. So the goal is always to make things easier for them, not more difficult. So we'll show you some of the things that we're working on right now. I'm going to give you a quick demo. So if you have no idea what we do at Viz, it's just going to give kind of like a little bit of an overview. So what you should be able to see is my phone. Does everybody see my phone? I think you should be. In the App Store, I'm going to go right here. And then this is really nice. You can just plug in Viz.ai. And this is like a tutorial. It is a couple years old, so we don't have all our best trade secrets in there to show everybody, but it does give you an opportunity to kind of pop in and really look at the DICOM viewer and the some of the communication things that we have. So you'll see that when I got mine, I'm going to open mine up right there at Viz Training. And again, it's like a 30,000-foot view of what we do and how we do it. We're going to demonstrate a couple of things with LVO, intracranial hemorrhage, and I'm going to click into any one of those. And again, this is something you'll be able to download and walk through yourselves when you have a little bit more time. I'm going to view that case, and they're going to cut into a couple of things very important, right? So we work with the CT scanners directly. For us, it's the more the merrier. The more scanners you have, the more users, the better, the more engagement your programs are going to be. Being able to connect directly to your scanner and then map those images to us, will be able to run through AWS cloud-based service, looking for large vessel occlusion, intracranial hemorrhage, and as I'll show you a few other disease states as well. So again, this is really, it's that point of contact right at the very beginning, and then being able to send out alerts to all viewers, right? So you're going to get transparency of imaging and transparency of communication all at once. When I click in here, you're going to see the demonstration of how I get information. My scans are coming through. I look at that, click into this one. Any ones that come in, I want to take a look at. So obviously very important, very interested in the large vessel occlusion. And then over here, you're going to see the effects of the DICOM viewer. I'm going to jump out of this one right away and go into my demo one here. So in my demo one, you can see, oh, I'm going to see my demo. Of course, I've timed out, right? Real life zooming. Biometric scans pretty quick once it did get back in. And that would be that case of that patient coming in with a large vessel occlusion. Just real quickly, I wanted to show you the dynamic DICOM viewer that we have. Number one, I'm going to be able to get any information about that patient that anybody has put in. So I can see already somebody's put in an NH of 22, but more importantly, clinical presentation obviously looks like a big bad stroke, either ischemic or hemorrhagic, as soon as we rule that out, right? So in my thumbnails, I'm going to have everything I want to look at, but obviously I want to focus into this thing that's highlighted, large vessel occlusion. And then you'll see here, now I'm going to have a real PACS in a pocket. I have the full capability of a DICOM viewer, being able to slide across all of my images in my axial view with a differentiator going all the way to the aortic arch, which is very important for us. Being able to reset this and pan in, zoom in, pan out, change the MIPS, all those things that are important for decision makers. I've got my non-contrast, well, all of that information as well with hyperdense vessels, you'll see in a couple of slides, and then in my CT perfusion. So I really just kind of wanted to show you the viewer, but all of this is really is just stepping up to the toolbox. So in my three dots up here, you're going to see I've got full communication panel, as well as the ability to be proactive and do things. I can one button touch and activate teams. So this obviously becomes very important when with the hyperacute phase and being able to activate things. I've got a view patient log that I can see an audit trail of everything that has happened, but more importantly, what has not happened yet. So now I can look at that and say, oh my God, Dr. Antevy has not seen this yet. I need to reach out and touch him, right? Being able to see that and looking through all of the audit trail, like say, I absolutely have to make sure that Jamie Strauss sees this patient right now. I can go in here. I think we'll get some hurricane effect with our Wi-Fi here. I've got my being able to reach out directly. So Jamie Strauss has not seen that yet. I can go into her and look for her directly. And then as soon as I find her, there she is. Now you'll notice I could text her directly or call directly. So this is a very important case. I want to be able to call and talk to her about it. And as I call, sorry, Jamie, I exposed your phone number there. Everybody in your directory is going to have the ability to reach out. We want to, my goal in life has always been to eliminate badge buddies. So this is a way to do that. Being able to build your directory for whatever you need to have. You want to make sure that all of your stations are online. Your EMS captains for everybody, you can have them all built in there. And then being able to share cases, not just call and text, but actually be able to share whole series, right? So that obviously be very important to be able to share that large vessel occlusion. Again, I'm going to pick on Jamie since you already saw her phone number. She's going to be in there. I'm going to search her. And then as soon as I find her, I can share that whole case to her. And then that way she gets, as soon as she logs in, she can jump right into that case. So all of these things that we built are really built to coordinate care. I don't have a whole lot of time, so I really don't want to spend too much time in here because I have a PowerPoint, but I could always go back to this. I'm going to take this over here and I'm going to share now this guy right here. So this is we're going to talk specifically about the cases that we have. I'm going to do it like so full screen. Okay, so Viz AI, right? So we're a mobile platform, but we also have a web base, and we're also integrated into radiology worklist, which is very important. And again, as we mentioned, we have more than large vessel occlusion. We have LVO, ICH, aneurysm now, subdural, PE, aortic, and many other right around the corner for FDA approval. Being a system of action is the way I described that in the demo, right? The delivery, we're pre-PACS. That means that you're going to get those images on your phone faster than you'll even get them mounted to your PACS station for reading. Very important. We're PACS free or independent of PACS, which means if PACS crashes, and we know it happens sometimes, you'll still have those images for decision-making processes, and you won't skip a beat. Being that we're cloud-based, detect, alert, and engage very quickly. And our action is to be proactive versus reactive. So we want to get away from that complete linear process that is so prevalent in treatment decisions currently in hospitals. We want to make sure we have transparency of the imaging as well as communication. And of course, we have validated data, clinical studies that show reduction in treatment times, increased treatment rates, improved health economics, as well as a lot of research. Okay, now we're talking about pre-PACS. So Jamie's on the call with me, and I see Dr. Felipe de los Rios. Very important. We work with those two people very closely, and EMS was really our #1 focus at Baptist Health South Florida when we were there. Dr. de los Rios is still there fighting the fight. So what we wanted to do is to be able to get a platform in the hands of people that are making those decisions or asking to make those decisions right up front. So we're looking at a couple of different things here. #1, we're in 1,200 hospitals already, and you can see the saturation that we have in not just Florida, but in, specifically in South Florida. So I think it's very important that we're kind of congregating on a platform that works very well right now. We're in 70 hubs and spokes compared to 22 in the competition, and there's still white space opportunities for 60 more. So it just gives you that geography thing. Now, what our problem is, and why do we need a Viz EMS? Why do we need help with a paging system even? When we started looking at EMS, I started thinking back as a stroke responder, and it's even earlier than EMS, or it's right after EMS, is that whole process of getting the information to the stroke team can be challenging, and again, very linear. You know, the EMS to the radio, to the charge nurse, to PBX, to the stroke alert. This could have been an amazing report. And what you end up on your pager or your cell phone is stroke alert ETA 5 minutes. So it really doesn't, a lot of times doesn't help. South Florida is way better than most parts of the country. I can tell you that right now. I have not just national experience, but now we're in 6 different countries and 11 sites in Europe. And I see a little bit of everything, right? So, but there is a resounding message, and that is EMS is limited. The information that a hospital gets is limited. Communication is often disjointed and siloed, and there is certainly not enough EMS outreach and collaboration. So what we're doing right away is helping out with that front end paging thing, right? So now we can communicate directly. Now I can get my stroke page picture, that stroke alert, whatever you're getting on your cell phone or a pager can now actually be presented as a patient jacket in your app. So now you can, again, have expanded participation because everybody in the app is going to be in there. You can have templated information for your reporting. It is one platform instead of pulling out 2 or 3 different ones, and it's pre-imaging. Now, what we're really excited about is that true EMS part of it, right? So this is an ongoing thing that we're doing. We're using EMS to enter the pre-hospital information in the field. So that means that patient jacket, that alert that I'm getting as a user on the phone is actually initiated by a paramedic or a flight nurse or whatever have you, EMS out in the field. That enables bi-directional communication, destination triage, obviously, if there's a question of whether it should go to a capable PSC, a TSC, or a CSC, right? Making sure that the right patient gets to the right place. So this is an example. So this would be the advantage for EMS, right? Recipient of the current stroke paging everyone aware of inbound strokes. Users get context and early communication. And you'll see, we see great examples of that, of asking leading questions like, is there a witness? Can you give me their cell phone number? Have they had anticoagulants in the last 48 hours? All of that kind of communication can now happen before the patient ever gets here. Parallel processes begin earlier and more people are engaged. This is an example of how that looks. So that patient jacket comes in, it says stroke alert. I click into my stroke alert. Now I'm getting the information about the stroke alert. And then immediately now we have communication within the teams, within the hospitals about that inbound patient, which is very important. And you'll notice here that you can actually add pictures and things like that directly in the app. Everything is HIPAA compliant and 100% protected and 100% communication. Okay, so that missing link to really truly make this is that EMS integration, right? Being able to get everything started earlier benefits everybody. So we've got, again, destination triage, improved lead time. So now I can activate teams that looks like a large vessel occlusion. I can go ahead and talk about, hey, let's call in the IR team to make sure they're on standby or whatever that process you have. Valuable information flow, again, leading questions that you can ask about. You'll be able to maintain that sphere of influence that you have within your outreach group, decrease treatment times, better outcomes, right? VizEMS. So getting the app in the hands of the providers is going to give that opportunity for EMS to really activate. So this was a mock stroke we did with a flight crew in Phoenix, and they immediately wanted to adopt that. This is like an example of some of that communication, being able to add that context, right? So the son's name is Daniel, here's his phone number. That actually creates a link. As you can see, it's underlined. Clicking in there, I'll be able to call Daniel directly and say, hey, Daniel, this is the St. Joe's Hospital. We understand that your dad looks like he may be having a stroke coming in, blah, blah, blah. No anticoagulation because they just told me, he's on Plavix, but he hasn't taken it in 3 weeks. So now we're getting some history and stuff like that. So again, very proactive bi-directional communication. Okay, this is a great case from Piedmont, and Jamie can chime in if she wants to add a little context as well. But a very aggressive neurosurgeon, and he is using this with his air crews in the Atlanta area, and not only activating from their point of view, but you'll see by some of that communication, it's definitely two-way. Like he'll tell them, no, go straight, make sure that when you land on the helipad, that you go straight to the cath lab. So a lot of very proactive things going on, right? So this case that he posted, I believe it was in LinkedIn, and I just took some snippets of it, but this is, this is that kind of real communication that happens, right? And then again, being able to plug in, here's your nice post, all that stuff for feedback with EMS, which we know is very important. EMS does a great job bringing the patient. We don't always do a great job of letting them know what we did with the patient, how did the patient do, all that kind of stuff. My son's a paramedic. I hear it all the time.
Yeah, I can chime in there too, Daniel, about Piedmont and kind of the structure of why, when I was at Piedmont, we really were looking at transporting across wide geographies, but also really just with traffic, which you all are very familiar with in Florida and South Florida, being able to get patients to where they need to be quickly. And we had a lot of challenges. So that was implemented with all of the Air Methods team and has been really successful. And they're working on publication, but has really cut the transport time and the ability to activate immediately to start pulling that patient into the comprehensive center for treatment and giving the field back the ability to connect directly with the physician to make those treatment decisions.
Yeah, some of those hospitals in that region in Atlanta are really very rural. So we saw immediate impact on those hospitals. Their door in, door out time literally plummeted because of the additional communication tool that goes along with and basically being able to have a hub think of like a military operation almost. It's like oversight or overview, right? They're the snipers in the tower looking down and saying, oh, look, I think I have a target over there. And that target happens to be an LV alert that pops up, or another kind of stroke patient that is definitely going to require tertiary care, that kind of thing. So again, we're in, yes, we're a question?
Yeah, Daniel, thank you. Just a quick question. I have a few comments, but I mean, again, I'd like to take this offline if it's too long. But first of all, we appreciate that you're considering EMS, which is obviously the reason that we started this coalition and connected with the stroke registry. My question for you is there a way to reduce the duplication of input of information? Your son's a paramedic, so you could ask him that. What we try to avoid is having them put information in one app and then go to their EPCR and have to retype everything in. Are you working with any of the other vendors out there to reduce the need for duplication? Because if that happens, you'll get more buy-in. It's tough to, our EMS folks do a lot of hard work, and they don't want to go from one app to the other to the other.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And Jamie is going to chime in, I'm sure, about this as well. But I will say one thing right away. We do integrate with, I want to say 2 of these ones that she'll tell you. We do have integration. The reality is we think that, once this is cooked, it's going to be better than that. We have EHR integration with Epic in a couple of sites. We're looking at SafetyPad, a couple of things like that. I've got a great conversation going on with a new EMS captain. Well, he's not a new captain, but he's new in the EMS role. Just finished his EMS captain course and is super excited about getting his station to pilot this. So we're looking at hopefully making something that won't require integrating 3 and 4 software packages as is, but with the ability to do that if it's needed. You rely on one, for instance. We wouldn't want you to kick out those other ones. We want to be able to integrate. So I guess the short/long answer is there is integration, but we really want to make this something that you won't feel you need to integrate anybody else with, right? Does that make sense? So just
well, are you with ESO? Because ESO is, I would say, 90% of South Florida. Well, I should say Broward County uses ESO. They're a big national provider for EPCR. Are you guys integrated with them?
We have not yet. We haven't yet. But Jamie, you want to add to that?
Yeah, so from an integration perspective, the way that our platform and ecosystem is built, since we're cloud-based, the integrations can happen from HL7 and they can be bi-directional, right? So we have to set up the work stream and the mapping to those discrete fields. But what we are able to do is really take any of the inputs that you would be putting in and push over, and same from Viz, anything that's being pushed in there can push over to yours. So that's just working through discovery to understand what is the exact integration we want to look at, but we're able to integrate pretty seamlessly with anything, especially if it's cloud-based.
Yeah. So in other words, maybe we ought to take this offline, because with another hat that I have in the world, I do have multiple integrations, so I know how those companies work.
Mm-hmm.
But back to our paramedics we're trying to have them be on scene for as short of a time as possible, get all the right information, treat the patient appropriately, go to the right facility, and then communicate with the hospital. We went through this process. Prajesh has to remind me, years ago. We tried this, and it was a failure.
2017
for a number of reasons. It was 2017, a long time ago. It was a failure because of the fact that one of the reasons is that it's hard to get them to adopt something that they don't see value in on their part of the world. And maybe I see Chief Popick, he and I are going to present here in a minute, but I'd love to hear any more EMS leaders on here talk about, or maybe give the Viz folks some insight into what would work for EMS. It's a great start, don't get me wrong.
Yeah, well, and to your point, that's exactly what we want to happen, right? We want to make something that, and I said it earlier, I want to make it easier for you, not harder. Right? It is going to be easier for us. I don't want it to be easier just for us. It has to be easier for everybody. And being able to integrate early on, and my initial thought when I had the conversation with that EMS captain was, all right, so where do you enter that information? Oh, we enter into the SafetyPad. Bam, that's an integration point for us, or a possibility, whether it's ESO, SafetyPad, or all of them. All right, we do have different systems in our South Florida counties.
Chief Popick, I saw. Yeah, go ahead, Chief.
Yeah, that if you've got to keep it on the most simplistic platform possible, that they're not triplicating or quadrupling the volume of work, documentation, etc. Pre-hospital doesn't like documentation. I don't know many people that really do love documentation.
No, nobody.
the easiest approach, the easiest way to, if I've got to fill this out, it's phenomenal information. I clearly understand where you're going with it, and I think it definitely has a place, especially stroke care or mimics. But somehow it's, if I'm filling this out and then you have chief officers because the system has no available units, etc., and the turnaround times need to be quick. It needs to be something that they can tap on, be a component of the overall EPCR, whatever the platform is that they're using, and then be able to integrate that, whether it's going into a cloud and then being downloaded from a cloud like we use other apps. But there's only so many people on scene that can function doing and filling out this information, especially if you've got a critical patient. Then, you know, the focus is going to be on the patient stabilization and supporting their, you know, end organ perfusion, etc. So it's got to be some type of a very simplistic approach for them. I would make the analogy that it's like asking them to perform an NIH stroke scale.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not practical for pre-hospital.
Right, for sure.
You know?
And we're 100% with you. That's exactly what we're looking for, is really, thought leaders like yourselves to say, hey, this is what will work, this will not work. That way we don't spend time on something that's not going to work, right? We want to make it, again, easier for you, not more difficult. I just wanted to point out a couple of things. Obviously, it's not just stroke, right? So I want to hammer that home. It's not just stroke. We are getting into all these other things. We already have a trauma platform. We are using this with ER physicians that are using it as a DICOM viewer and communication tool. STEMI cardiac is right around the corner that we're working on right now. Jamie's teams have that. Okay, so I did want to pander to you all because I this is one of my favorite publications, right? EMS World. I actually have seen these episodes or the journals, right? So this is something that is very important. This, if you look at what the message I'm trying to get here is that we want to collaborate. We want to partner with you all, right? Partnering for projects. Some of those potential things that, you know, I've heard kicked around. Pre-hospital stroke scale correlation with CTA results, for instance. That's something that we could easily dig into. Based on those results, would we look to unify an advanced stroke scale in South Florida instead of having the two major ones or three of them that we use or whatever? Or maybe there's time for a new one that actually could work to cover that. DIDO, we know that we are decreasing in the Atlanta region already, this door in, door out decrease for spokes and hubs. And then I don't know if this is trademarked yet. If it's not, I want to trademark it, but we want to decrease in the street to treat time, right? So that's your on-scene time to the treatment time. I don't know if it's trademarked, but I'm going to claim it if it's not. And basically, we are in South Florida. Jamie just recently moved to Atlanta. She was here for a long time. Lisa Guillen on the call is here. Brian Redmond, I see on the call, is here. So our team is in South Florida. And when I say this is made in South Florida, it really is, because we're the ones pushing our company to say, hey, we need a Viz EMS platform because how important it is to work in that pre-hospital field. And I think that this would be a great opportunity to partner with you all to see, can you help us make this a reality, to make that the platform that it is the way you want to make it, the way you want to design it. When we turned around and recognized that we needed a web-based, for instance, our engineers never thought we would need a web-based app because it's a mobile device. Why would I need that? We gave them the story. Radiologists want to see this next to their big monitors that are reading scans. So great, we built a web. But what we did is we got radiologists, neuroradiologists, and interventionalists and asked us, do you want to replicate this, or do you want this to look more like a PAC station? They all said we wanted to make it look like a PAC station. So we work with people to make sure that it's a product that you want to use and not just something that we're going to sell you. We're not selling you subscriptions. We want to sell partnerships, right? And I think
we really appreciate that. I know that the idea that Brajesh and I had was to bring in all the different options to the group, to get all the opinions, that are on the table, and look at all the options. You guys have done great work, definitely moving in the right direction. And I would love to speak to you guys offline as well if you had the time. But Brajesh,
I know we have
should we open it up for?
Can I add one more thing, Peter? Sorry, just, from my perspective, I oversee clinical affairs, and my team's role is really to partner and have partnerships, whether it's with hospitals or organizations where we really want to do meaningful research. And on my team, there's scientists that can write the IRBs, and we have coordinators and research support. So I would really like to use South Florida, and because of the dynamic EMS work that you've all done to show value. So I wanted to put that out on the table as well, that we do have that internal team support. I have a team of about 10 clinical affairs that do different research and ClinOps work.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Jamie. I want to let Brijesh come and make a couple of comments, but what I would say to that is the following, is that whenever we introduce something big, a big change into South Florida, into the EMS system, we typically do it, in one pocket. We validate it. Does it work or not work? If it doesn't work, we move on. If it works, then we'll continue to spread it out, just like whole blood, which you're seeing now is expand
Right.
across, and that's the great work of Jim Roach and Heath Clark and Charlie Coyle and so forth. But so we're definitely interested in that. But Brijesh, you wanted to make a few comments. Go ahead.
Sure. Thanks, Peter. And excellent presentation, Daniel. Really appreciate all the information. I agree, wholeheartedly with Peter. Given our past experience with, some of the other technologies, we want to get this right. This time around, given that we're now more than 8 years from the time mechanical thrombectomy has become a standard of care, I think our collective experience, we, as he said, want to learn from all the available technology vendors out there and make an informed decision in terms of what makes sense for our region, given that we have a multitude of fragmented, EMS agencies, working across county lines sometimes. And it's not as simple as just implementing within one healthcare system. Ideally, this should be countywide and hopefully tri-county.
Right.
And that way we can also scale this up with data collection and do meaningful research. It's not just improving patient encashment area within one healthcare system or having any competitive advantage.
Right.
It would be great if Viz or any other technology that we aim to utilize pre-hospital can be implemented in hospital as well. So that way funding is not an issue either, because, the challenge with a lot of the technologies is who pays for it, right?
Right.
And so these things can become very expensive very quickly. And ultimately, if the hospitals are willing to support a product like this, and I think there's inherent value, then pre-hospital should come at no charge. And that way, all the great work paramedics are doing, we can utilize that information, also have it connected to, as you'll see in a second, through the Florida Stroke Registry, to the databases that exist. And as Peter said, not duplicate the work that we're doing or the work that paramedics are doing pre-hospital. We want them to focus on the patients, use the existing ESO platforms or whichever EPCRs exist so that they don't have to take out their smartphones and use a second app. So
Right.
I think I would encourage any vendor out there to use APIs, connect to existing platforms, and then be able to connect to the in-hospital platforms such as Epic, Cerner, et cetera, so that all of this data is invaluable. And if you have, just like you showed, the entire spectrum of stroke care from on-scene to arrival to reperfusion, nicely packaged, being able to share with EMS, but also through the databases so that we can turn this around in real time and share it with EMS on a quarterly basis, right? And so there's so much opportunity here for game mechanics and saying, okay, look, which county is better, door to reperfusion, door to needle, and allow all of us to improve. That has been our overarching goal for the last 7-8 years,
Yep.
is let the data do the talking.
Transparency of data.
And,
exactly.
yeah. And so we're excited about this. And like Peter said, we can follow up offline.
Yeah, thanks for that, Brijesh. And we can set up an additional call and we can highlight we have what's Viz Community, where we do inter-facility connections and inter-community connections. So we can talk through that as well. I know we're at time.
Yeah. And we are local, so we could also get together, right? So.
Awesome. So
I just want to know how,
Peter, go ahead.
Brijesh, I just want to know how you look younger today than you do in that picture. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Haven't figured that out yet.
I think
No,
being on
Peter,
call
Peter, you
also-
look exactly the same, Peter. So I wouldn't say anything. Maybe just the
My wife
glasses.
doesn't think so. My wife doesn't think so, but All right, Brajesh, you want to move on to, I think, instead of going with Dr. Dunn, who I don't see him on the call just yet, you want to go with Carolina, Dr. Gutierrez?
Yeah, that would be great. We have Carolina joining us to represent the Florida Stroke Registry team from University of Miami. And Carolina has done some amazing work for our South Florida Stroke Coalition. So we're grateful to have you join us, Carolina. She has some excellent updates that will be useful for EMS and the stroke centers.
Thanks. Do you want me to share the slides, or I know you have them as well?
Yeah.
We're gonna
Yeah,
tag
if you have them, Carolina, that'd be great. Thank you. And thanks, Daniel.
No worries. Hi, Daniel. Nice to
Thank
see
you.
you.
Hi, Carolina.
I haven't seen you in a while.
I see a lot of friendly faces here.
So just a quick update on my end about the Florida Stroke Registry, and I'm going to have Dr. Mehta and Dr. Antebi join me in on some parts as we update you all on our regional dashboards and some of the new things that we have with regard to data transparency that you just mentioned. The quick overview that we usually bring to you all is about how many hospitals we have in the stroke registry now. It's 167. We have still pending about another 10 to 15. It depends on the day because hospitals get purchased and then they also go away. Names change and it seems to be always a moving target, but we're pretty close to accomplishing having most of the hospitals, the majority of the hospitals, stroke centers in the Florida Stroke Registry. And we still continue to monitor. Obviously, at this point, we would hope that all hospitals would be nationally certified, but there's still a few that are probably in the process of becoming nationally certified. So we've caught them as we've monitored in a time where they're not quite there yet. And that's what we show here. Majority, again, CSCs are nationally certified. Here's the the layout of the different kinds of national certifications for CSC, the thrombectomy stroke capable primary stroke centers, and then the ASRs, and then the nuns. Again, there's some, what's happening with the nuns, I think is, again, there's some transitioning happening, but we're also beginning to capture some rural sites, which is a little bit interesting and very exciting for us because we never had those in the past. I think we're beginning to get them because the American Heart Association is offering rural sites free use of the Get With The Guidelines stroke tool for 5 years. So I think that's how we're beginning to get that data, and we'll begin to document that and lay that out a little bit better for you all, for our stakeholders to see what that's about. With regard to your counties, with Broward, Miami-Dade, and Palm Beach, these are the most recent numbers in terms of stroke, in terms of the certifications and in terms of the national certified centers. Again, I'm showing you what we have seen after a laborious process of going through each of the national certifying sites and through the state website to see how hospitals lay out. In some cases, the ones that I'm showing you where there's, I'm calling them primary stroke center ACA, so self-certified, they could be on the verge of becoming. So, you know, we're showing you as it is, but again, we're very hopeful that these are all becoming nationally certified. These are also for those of you who look at your regional dashboard, the hospitals that you're going to see in the regional dashboard for Broward, in the regional dashboard for Miami-Dade County, and then in the regional dashboard for Palm Beach. So that's the current status of your hospitals and for the Stroke Coalition. I think what we want to talk a little bit about for you all next, and I'm going to hand the mic to Brajesh to talk about this, is basically our regional dashboard updates, the format. We've been working on this for several months now, maybe a year, but we're finally there in terms of showing you this data in terms of trends. And I think that'll be really useful to you all. We can still tweak things to improve so that the reports are better and easier for you to read. But of course, we also have, I wanted to mention real quickly before I stop talking, you all talked about the door in, door out measures. That's something that we want to incorporate in these dashboards as well. So in the near future, we'll be reaching out to you for more suggestions, advice, feedback, and potentially ask some of you to be on a subcommittee to help us make this happen. So Brajesh, do you have access to this, or do you want me to show my screen?
Yeah, if you don't mind sharing your screen, and thanks very much for that update. Carolina and you know, the team at UM led by Dr. Sacco as well, they've done a fantastic job of pulling together all this data which, as you can imagine, is fairly cumbersome. But to be able to do it consistently, quarter after quarter, year over year for the last, at least few years that we've begun this effort, and then share it with EMS is invaluable. And the hospitals, have all of this data that they can now benchmark. And the FSR team has updated each of these modules. So I'll go through them one at a time. So up at the very top, you can see there's two categories. So there's IVTPA and endovascular thrombectomy. And so it's easy to just now see kind of big picture how patients, how hospitals are doing from a quality standpoint by treatment modality. And so you have the overall percentage of IVTPA, given at each of the hospitals. And so this is just in Broward, and they're benchmarked against other, regions throughout the state. And we're also looking at whether it's possible to benchmark at a national level to see how counties and at a state level were performing compared to the US. The median door to needle time, I know that's of, probably most significance in terms of a proxy for quality and efficiency. So that you can see, most of the hospitals, the green are those that are high volume centers, the blue are medium volume, and then the orange are the low volume centers. And within the appendix, the definition for how those are labeled are further explained. So, all of this is fairly objective based on existing literature of how they're, sort of labeled as high, medium, and low. And overall, the trend you can see is that the high volume centers do better than the overall sort of median for low volume centers. Experience matters. And the 90-day MRS at discharge, at discharge and at 90 days are resulted there. We have a lot of gaps there, and that's something we've discussed over the years. And you can see that the high volume centers have done a better job than the low volume in terms of follow-up. It's not just important to provide, these time-sensitive treatments, but to also measure how these patients do in terms of their functional independence at the time of discharge in 90 days. And that requires, staffing and personnel making phone calls at, 30 days, 90 days to, determine the impact of the care that we provide. So definitely want to encourage, where there are gaps to do everything possible, among the stroke coordinators and C-suite personnel to, ensure that the follow-up data is collected as much as possible. Symptomatic ICH, again, similar trends where the high volume centers are providing this data. And you can also see it's based on the higher overall percentage of treatments and, overall the denominator of stroke patients that come in and then get treated, that understandably the higher volume centers, will have more realistic sort of symptomatic ICH rates. It's, overall more reliable given the higher power in the numbers. And if you can switch over, Carolina, to the EVT dashboard. And again, this is for all of 2021, quarter 1 through 4. They are working on the FSR team on, year-to-date data. And so that will be accessible, I believe, by end of this year, if not sooner.
Yeah, sorry, I'm having trouble. Sorry, having trouble getting it in here, but to your response about when it'll be available, we're working on quarter 1, 2022, and hopefully that'll be out by mid-November, if not sooner. And I apologize, this doesn't seem to be working again.
That's okay. If it loads, great. The main point of the EVT dashboard, similar to IVTPA, it shows the percentage of eligible patients that receive the therapy. Those patients that come in with large vessel occlusion, are the ones that are tracked. And then what is the door to puncture time? The benchmark that we're aiming for is ideally less than 60 minutes. And then reperfusion, at least by AHA, ASA standards, is 120 minutes. Within some of our individual health systems, we've raised the bar even more, if you will, and we've made our internal benchmarks 90 minutes. So door to vessel open 90 minutes. And in terms of symptomatic ICH rates, those are also reported as part of Joint Commission and DNV criteria. And as we also discuss in a second, greater number of the previously PSCs or TSCs going comprehensive, our hope is to also send to EMS some meaningful information and reports on how hemorrhagic patients are doing, specifically those with ruptured aneurysms, intracerebral hemorrhages, and be able to better understand the impact of the care provided at TSCs and CSCs for hemorrhagic patients. Carolina,
Rajesh, do you want me to
yes.
convert over now to the EMS medical director view, Carolina and Rajesh?
Yeah, and I can
Yes.
show it
Okay.
either on these slides or if you have your own.
I have it. Yeah, I have it. Maybe it'll be easier for me to navigate it this way. Let me just share my screen. So just as a setup for what you're going to see next, and this is really a lot of work. Let me just mute that person, sorry. There's been a lot of work done by Dr. Gutierrez and the entire Florida Stroke Registry team, what I'm about to show you. And it's really meant for EMS, for the medical director, to be able to partner up with their local hospital that they transfer to, and start to understand what the data looks like and how they can collaborate better. So let me share my screen. And this, what you're going to see here now is only going to be available to medical directors with a password. And so you see I'm logged in as me here at the top. And as I go down, what Carolina and the team have done is just incredible. What they've done here is they've said, okay, for this particular county, we're going to use Broward County. On the left-hand column, you see the EMS system name, the medical director. And then if I just click on the stroke center, I open it up, and now you can see that, a single agency, Coral Springs as an example, we transport to lots of different facilities. We have the potential to do that. And what was always very difficult is trying to keep track of, did that hospital allow the medical director to see what letter they were on the dashboard? So we're calling that a transparency column here. And if that's the case, I would just click a yes or no. And the only people who could see this particular page are the medical directors. And we also have in here the name of the hospital, what their certification is, and then the stroke coordinator. And all this is information that we're kind of pulling from different sources. So if you see something on the screen here that's not correct, just speak to Dr. Gutierrez and it'll be corrected. This is not available to anyone just yet. This is, the work that's been done up until this point. And then up here, we'll be able to see the dashboards themselves. And then if there's any texting between medical directors, they've given us like a internal texting capability so we can discuss with each other. So Caroline, is there anything else that I missed or that you wanted to mention?
Sure. So just basically that, the idea behind this is to begin to follow the collaboration between the hospitals and the EMS directors. And so in the back end, what we're planning on doing is that as the EMS directors have access to this, and they indicate, yes, I got the hospital shared the code with me and they collaborated with me. I think on every quarterly basis, what FSR will do is capture that information and let you all know. So then in this forum, you'll be able to talk about it. Oh, we're so happy that our entire Miami-Dade County sharing the dashboards with their EMS directors or not, and understand potentially why that collaboration is not happening. So that's the kind of leaning forward that we're trying to do with regard to data sharing, and that's what this accomplishes. hopefully at some point we can get rid of this because you all will be sharing data and we won't need this kind of a chart to track. I think the other thing we weren't able to show you because we're still trying to perfect it is the chat that we have set up for you all on this platform. It'll be a little bit, I know, Peter, you showed it to me before. It's a kind of a social media-ish type of format. We're trying to establish that on that platform that Peter just showed you. What we're hoping is that whatever conversations you all have between you, that will be a foundation for more things that we can do, the Florida Stroke Registry for EMS and hospital. So I think a lot of gold can come out of this if you use it. And let me just show you the last slide, if you don't mind, as we end this section.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's what I wanted to mention. That's all, Peter, if you want to continue.
Oh, yes, great.
I think I just wanted to just let you guys know, again, these are the last steps. So we've been talking about this for a little while now, and it really has been laborious, and we apologize, but it's hard to set up the programming on how to do this stuff without it being a Frankenstein, chart. So hopefully it's going to be user-friendly and it'll be something that you guys can use comfortably. So what's left to do here is we're planning on, as I said, accomplishing the Q1 2022 FSR regional dashboards. It's a quarter of data from that time period. If we can, we'll try to bring in more real-time data, but at this point, this is how slow it is. It's about 6 months behind, right? So that will be available hopefully by June, by November. At that same point, what we're going to do is we need to notify the hospitals and let them know we're doing this. So we have to let them know this is a new initiative, nothing different. We're not unblinding any data. We're just strongly encouraging that you collaborate with your EMS director through this particular initiative. And so this is how it's going to work. We're also going to get the email addresses from BMO, who's been collaborating with us to get us all the EMS directors in this, at least using the regional, who should be using the regional dashboards, their associated hospitals, et cetera. Once we get that, then we'll create an account for you all so that you don't have to create it. We may reach out to you in case we have a wrong email address, and or as Peter said, if some of the information that we have associated is incorrect, maybe we don't have all the hospitals that you're sending your patients to, or there's some small hiccup that we can fix. And then finally, we should schedule some time to train you, the EMS directors. I know the audience is not full of EMS directors, but those who are on, show you how to use these dashboards. To read them, they're somewhat self-descriptive, but possibly you could use a quick little tip. And I know Peter and Brajesh actually have a video that's great that we have on our website that you all can use. I think that's really all I wanted to update you all on. We want to thank you all. Of course, Peter and Brajesh are part of our advisory committee, so they know a lot about the stuff that we do in the FSR, and I'm grateful that they contribute and that they're part of this presentation. And this is all of us from UM, and of course we have our Department of Health, who is also heavily involved in the stuff that we do. So thank you all.
Thank you, Carolina. I just want to thank you. I don't think people recognize how much work you guys do behind the scenes to make these dashboards come to life, and then in turn improve the care that our patients are receiving, and to the hospitals who are providing the data and who are come to these meetings. We really appreciate that. We finally have kind of full 360 collaboration with EMS, the hospitals, and the Florida Stroke Registry, so from the state level as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you all.
All right, Brajesh, you want to move on to Dr. Dunn? I can introduce Rob.
Yes, that would be great. Thanks, Peter.
All right, so I have the pleasure to introduce a good friend of mine. He's an EMS medical director in the great state of Michigan, in Detroit. And Rob is part of a group that I'm in, where we have kind of like 50 EMS medical directors from the 50 most populated portions of the United States. And I heard about this last year, where he is now the principal investigator on a very neat tool, if you will, that could potentially help evaluate LVO without using like a RACE or the FastED or VAN, but just by putting a headband that functions as an EEG, if you will, to detect LVO. So there's Dr. Dunn. Rob, thanks for joining us, and appreciate you making this presentation for us here on the webinar. Feel free to share your screen at any time.
Yeah, I'll share my screen in just a second. I just want to say hello. I've been listening for a little bit. We have some similar collaborations going on in my state, although I don't think we're at the level of sophistication yet. I actually co-chair our state systems of care task force, which is trying to create some administrative rules to create much more integrated stroke data system and actually get some funding for it, which is always a challenge, as well as, kind of codify some of our destination protocols. So always interesting to hear what's going on in other states, and it's great. And I always appreciate Peter. We've had him up here giving some talks, and I think frankly, like a lot of things in medicine and EMS, it's all R&D, rip off and duplicate. So I've definitely taken some of Peter's stuff. So yeah, I want to talk a little bit about a clinical trial that we're doing. So let me share this. I promise not to kill you with PowerPoint. And let's see if that looks like it's going to work. You guys seeing a slide?
Yeah, perfect.
All right. So it's called the Episode Trial. It is a device trial. As Peter was talking about it, it's not quite an EEG. It's actually a very sensitive accelerometer that can sense the pulsation of blood flow in the brain, right? We all know we've got accelerometers all over the place now. There's one in your laptop. There's a whole bunch of them in your phone. They've gotten very sensitive. So this was some of the initial work done on this. And this was what I'd call a fixed base deployment. They were testing this out in triage at hospitals. It's nice, it's quiet, the patients are sitting down. And the picture that you see next to this headband, and this is one of the early prototypes, that's actually the headband that we started this trial, and I'll show you the updated one that looks a bit more like a finished product and less like something made in someone's garage. And you can see the different kinds of blood flow that it detects. You can see a normal, you can see, a stroke, kind of an evolution where you see that little fuzzier thing. And then you see a middle cerebral artery occlusion there, where you see this very kind of fuzzy, it almost would be like the equivalent of static. Because it's not sensing a clear pulsation from that part of the brain. It reads this in about 80 seconds, and the company, this is not yet FDA approved, it's still experimental, but it's a minimal risk diagnostic device. The company was interested in trying this out in EMS. As many of you know, there has been a bunch of work pre-hospital, kind of looking for, if you will, like the holy grail of pre-hospital stroke research, something that's the equivalent to an EKG, the way an EKG is for STEMI. And this is one of many devices that are out there. You guys may have participated in some trials of this device, but in their initial fixed base deployment, they found that in the this first line on this is the device. The first line is the device. And then these, of course, are all kinds of other stroke scales and physical exam assessments for stroke. They found it to have a fairly good, this is just crude accuracy. Again, this isn't a fixed population that's sitting still in the hospital. And a fairly low false negative rate. And again, this is on that initial device. So they approached us, and then we actually worked with a number of other EMS systems around the country to deploy this in kind of a two-phase clinical trial. There's the initial phase of about 150 patients, which we're just finishing up, and the second phase, which we hope to be starting soon. And I've actually spoken at least to some of you in Florida about potentially being sites and connecting you with the sponsor. So in our state, to do pre-hospital research has a pretty clear path. We actually have a state law that includes EMS studies in the state law. So it creates a path to do EMS research. There's a couple steps that are different, of course, than doing in-hospital research. One is you have to create a pre-hospital protocol as if you were going to be using this device in a kind of straightforward, regular fashion. So we created a protocol that basically, and that's right here on the screen. This looks just like our other local protocols or guidelines. And it basically says, if you have, any suspicion of stroke or someone who has altered mental status, you're going to apply this device. And that's kind of the field part of it. That has to get approved by our IRB. We use our Wayne State IRB to approve that kind of phase of the trial. That goes to a state task force, which reviews it to make sure we're not doing something crazy or violating state law. And then that gets approved. At the same time, we're working on the kind of big picture clinical trial protocol. So we can take and get the patient's data, because what we want to do, of course, is see what the actual outcome is. And for this, our IRB agreed that we could do delayed consent. So all the patients will get the device placed, and then they'll be approached for consent after arrival at the hospital. And they can choose to have their data used for the study, or their data can be deleted at that time. It takes about 90 seconds to get a reading from the patient, and every one of our hospitals in our area has replacement devices. So they'll leave the device at the hospital and they'll take a new device. We are all blinded to what this information is, because we want to look to see how this works in terms of a comparison. And we have done an interim data analysis on it, which I'll show you in a minute, but I wanted to show you what the new, the more, potentially what a commercial device could look like after the FDA. This is what the current device looks like. It's finished. It doesn't have obvious, solder joints and surface mount components on it. You can see it as a fairly normal, it looks like a white headband that anyone would wear. And rather than going into some kind of tablet or iPhone, it has a readout on it. Again, we have it blinded. It's not telling the medic what the likelihood of an LVO is. You can see in this picture that this is giving a reading of a 95% likelihood of an LVO. That information is again blinded and in the background and is getting uploaded, and then the data from the patient is getting uploaded, and that's getting adjudicated by people who aren't involved in enrolling patients in the study. Right now, we have a number of EMS agencies and hospitals involved. We've expanded across Michigan, and UC San Francisco and Sutter Health are also participating. The company and we got Michigan and we've got California. Companies based in Cupertino, but works very closely with a couple of the medical device companies located in West Michigan and Kalamazoo, Michigan. So that's kind of the connection. We were, at the time I made this slide, we were 223 enrollments from Detroit and Kalamazoo at the time. They were just getting started in California. Since then, we're almost at 250. I think we were like at 245. We'll probably end up getting a few more than 250 for the first phase. Our interim analysis with about 150 patients was we had 11% total LVOs, and that the Data Safety Monitoring Board looked as though it was good to continue and supported expanding the trial to do a full kind of second stage trial on the device that's designed to be a little bit more like the commercial device, with the hope that the company will get adequate data to submit to the FDA. You can see we were a little slow getting started, and like most clinical trials, really took off once we, once people got used to it and got some more education out there. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I have both devices here. But if it wasn't clear, the device also attaches as a 3-lead, so it's sensing where you are in the cardiac cycle when it's comparing that pulse the analysis of what's going on all occurs within the device. The original device, that all occurred within an iPhone 10. But pretty primitive now. But the current device at all is just a custom device that then will ultimately give you a probability, if you will, of LVO based on the head counter pulsation readings. So it's neat. We're going to see. I mean, it'll be interesting. Again, whoever I think comes up with a device that works and is offering us that level of decision support in the field, I think that could be potentially useful. Obviously, it's more useful in some situations than others, particularly in our state. We have a lot of comprehensive and thrombectomy capable centers, but they really fade off as you get into the fringes of even urban areas. What we would call our ex-urban areas often are a reasonable distance from a comprehensive stroke center. Our state has a fairly restrictive certificate of need law. So even if the population moves, you don't get to build a new hospital. So our hospitals tend to be in the core of our urban area. So if you're gonna make a decision about bypass, I think a lot of people would like to see something like this. This is one of multiple pre-hospital research projects we have going on. We did actually Peter was talking about EEG. We actually did an EEG, pre-hospital EEG, simple EEG project a few years ago that didn't really pan out to anything, but there's a lot of interest in the technology of this space. And I appreciate Peter asking me to come. Hopefully, it's not people aren't just nodding off at it, but happy to take some.
No, Rob, this is
interesting stuff.
Yeah, this was excellent. You had shown a data slide early on that showed, I think, like a 94% correlation. Do you have data from the 250 or the almost 250 that you?
Not yet, not until we're
said,
complete. We're blinded until we're complete. So we had,
gotcha.
We had a separately blinded group that basically gave us the thumbs up or thumbs down based on the quality of data from about the first half of the patients. And they gave us a thumbs up. So that was reassuring.
And the feedback from the crews, now that it's in this device, it's all in one unit. Is it basically just throw it on 90 seconds later, you have a probability? I mean, is that easy?
Yeah. So I can even, I can put it on here. This is actually a live device. You put it on, it says right. So you put it in the right place. It has a picture on the package about showing you where to put it. It's just like putting on a hair headband. I've got my hair in a ponytail today, so you can't, I can't use that. And then it has a screen that tells you what to do. And I'm sure right now it's telling me what to do is connect the ECG leads to remind you of that. And then if you try to do it without it, it'll say check ECG connection. So, and it comes with it's got extra batteries, and it's got a set of red dots in there to attach it to the person's chest. And then I'll just tell it to go ahead, proceed without good connection. Okay. And then it'll say recording started. It's telling me to hold still. And then it has a little bar.
Wow. So while we're waiting for that result, I would love to see.
Well, you won't see the result because this is one of the research devices, so it's blind.
Okay. Oh, that's right. Okay. I'm curious. Since I've already seen this, there's a lot of really smart people on this call from the EMS side and the hospital side. I'm curious. Does anyone have any thoughts for Dr. Dunn? Comments? Who wants to jump on board and be a site? What are your thoughts?
Right. So we are looking for sites for the next. I mean, I've got a question if no one else has a question. So, one of the questions I have, and it's been kind of a mixed bag for my neurointerventional colleagues. Some are like, oh, that's great. Some people are very comfortable with, our places where we do where it's easy to do a bypass now. We're certainly doing something similar to what you are. The question I have is it something that's really useful in most settings? And if it is, are there certain settings where it might be more useful, like places that are farther away or more rural?
Yeah, I mean, that's an excellent question. Will this detect a bleed versus an ischemic stroke, or it's only really for LVO?
It'll give you an abnormal, anytime there's abnormal blood flow, it will give you, it'll give you something. It won't be as clean, like, you know, the tracings that are present for when someone has a large vessel occlusion, where you get that kind of that fuzzy look, are, you know, pretty unique signature for that vessel. I mean, if you have some increased intracranial pressure from a subdural or an acute subarachnoid, you're going to get an abnormal tracing because you don't have normal flow there. You're getting some compression or leakage out of that vessel. So it won't look normal, but it won't, you know, and in fact, if we see enough of those, which we've had a handful of bleeds, we may ultimately be something that develops as a signature, but all the focus has been on LVO.
The other question I have for you, and maybe some other people are thinking this question, is this reusable? And then what is the approximate cost? I know that you're not part of the company, but do you have any insight for us as to?
Yeah, so it is reusable. The original research device was not, again, it looks very homemade, you know. But you know, this is something that's completely sealed, waterproof, you know, easily cleaned, you know, obviously unless it's cracked or damaged, similar to other things. You know, we've asked that question back and forth with the company. The company hasn't decided on pricing. They're trying to figure that piece out, you know, based on their costs. For a while anyway, we're going down. I don't know how they are with inflation. You know, but I think that's another one of the key pieces, right? Is, you know, why would necessarily, you know, an EMS agency purchase this? You know, I use the example a lot when we were having some discussions about it, of the early days of 12-lead EKG, when a lot of people in the hospital thought, oh, why do we need the ambulance to do a 12-lead? We'll just do it when they get here. And of course, what we saw is that when you get here is actually a pretty long delay before that 12-lead's done. And you know, people, I think, came around to that, but often we created some kind of regional system, or we got grant funding or something to create that system. And I think a lot of us were kind of involved in that at the time. The question is, where does this fit? You know, who's, you know, am I going to my city council to say we should buy this? What's the juice to squeeze, right? We don't, obviously, it doesn't change what we can do in terms of, you know, billing and collections in EMS, right? It's an extra cost. So, you know, I think it's something that's going to be more like a regional systems of care decision about whether it's useful or not. So I think that's one of the things, like, yeah, this could be awesome. It could be cool. It could work really well. But people, you know, people may say it's not useful for them.
Yeah, I think we would find great use. I mean, I'm not seeing many people here who are raising their hands, and we do have to move on to the next topic. But if people do have questions or comments, is it okay if I give them your email?
Yeah, of course. Email,
okay,
cell phone, whatever.
Awesome. And this has been recorded. I'm sure other people will watch it as well. So thanks, Rob, for coming on, and appreciate you taking the call.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
I have
Brajesh.
a quick question.
Oh, go ahead.
Thanks.
Yeah, Dr. Dunn, that was an excellent presentation. Thank you for taking the time. So with the sites that are testing this, are they all using the, you know, any specific LVO scale in the field? Are you looking at, you know, positive predictive value of how each of these scales, or at least the popular ones like RACE, FAST-TD, measure up to the ability of the technology to detect the LVO? And then on arrival, are they all being confirmed by CTA or MRA? What's the vessel imaging modality?
Great question. So different systems are using different scales. Mostly RACE and FAST-TD are the two most common in our study sites. And so, yes, we are collecting that data because that's also somewhat of a moving target in terms of when they implement it, how good they are. We already have seen some EMS system to system variability on that, even with the same scale and the same training. So yeah, we're going to be comparing that for this group of patients and for their stroke patients overall. That's one of the things we put into our stroke registry. And then at the hospital, all the hospitals that are participating in this are at minimum doing CT and CTA. We don't have any places. It's not typical in our area. Again, some of that's related to our kind of ridiculous certificate of need law for MR machines, is that nobody's doing front end MR. It is plus minus some of the sites are doing CTP as part of their standard protocol. So some sites, everybody gets CT, CTA, CTP, and at all the sites, everyone's at least getting CT, CTA.
And we have Dr. Moskowitz. Shay, go ahead. We don't hear you.
Sorry, the devil will always be in the details. The mute. Sorry. So the big question I'd love to know is, when do you anticipate having some public release of the data? Because I think that the utility will come from sensitivity, specificity, and really what does that translate to in a bigger model?
Yeah. So
go ahead. I'm sorry. I was just going to say, the reason why I bring that up is for a system unlike EKG, when they hit the ER, you know what they get? An EKG. So they're getting in the field what they're getting as soon as they hit the door. If you said I had a device that gives a CT perfusion and CT angiogram with this cool headband, you would have a very, very different pitch than I have a surrogate marker for a high LVO predictive score. Why would you do it again? Because you didn't replace standard of care in the emergency room. You've given me a better predictor. I will say that there may be great value in that it increases the level of awareness that a medic might have that there is a neurovascular process going on, which means that when they hit the ER door, they'll be far more likely to be received with the same enthusiasm that those that really care and love and breathe and eat stroke would give them when they hit the door, right? So I see it in that model as a very potentially useful tool, provided that it is a good predictor. So when do you anticipate having some public data for consumption?
Probably end of the calendar year or slightly after. Like I said, we're just about done with that first 250 group now. The analysis is, we did interim analysis, so we already have a pretty easy plan for doing the analysis, and with the goal of presenting it at one of the spring meetings, based on submission the deadlines. And to your point, some of it, and it depends on where you are. I think this is one of the key things geographically. I mean, I think of it a bit like the early days of STEMI, when of my 12 hospitals, only 3 of them were STEMI centers. So that EKG meant you were going to a different hospital, not the hospital that was necessarily in front of you or across the street from you. So I think one of the thoughts of, in some places, could it be used to support decision-making about where you're going to go with your patient? I think our most functional hospitals, for STEMI, actually don't repeat the EKG when you arrive, but they take you directly to the cath lab. Obviously you still need a CT at some point, because you're still, bleed or no bleed question is always there. But I think that that's exactly, I think we'll see how that evolves, and whether it's, even if it's great, whether it's actually useful in a lot of systems.
Excellent. Brajesh.
Yeah, last comment. I think technology like this, I find a lot of potential utility for those that have mild deficits, right? I think, as the literature has shown, if a patient has a gaze preference, collect sort of cumulative cortical sinus gaze, aphasia, hemiplegia, there's a high pretest probability, especially the gaze preference.
Absolutely.
But for those that have fluctuating deficits or, let's say no cortical signs, but just some motor deficits, for a technology like this to pick up a LVO with a high probability and then facilitate a transfer directly to a CSC, I think would be awesome.
Awesome. Great comment. All right. So I
So,
think we'll
sorry,
wrap this segment up. Oh,
Sorry, I have one more question, kind of a dumb medic question, but I think it's important. Can it tell the difference between somebody that has past deficit from a stroke versus something new going on? Because I think that's something that comes up a lot in the field.
Yeah, so they did ask that question in some of their fixed base studies when they were trying to kind of proof of concept on the device, and it certainly appeared that it did that the difference between an acute occlusion of blood flow and an old area of stroke with or without some what we assume is some collateral flow definitely appeared to be different.
excellent. Great question too. That's not a dumb medic question at all.
That's a great question.
All right, so we'll move on. And for the last segment, I just have to give a lot of credit. First, let me share my screen here. We're going to move into a data discussion. And so, Rob, thank you very much. We appreciate you so much.
All right, thanks,
this next
guys.
section is, all right, take care. We'll speak soon. This next section is a data discussion, and it came about because there's a really smart guy in this call who I look up to, and I've known Andy for many years now, and I'm pleasure to work with him at Davie Fire Rescue. He's a battalion chief, but Andy is kind of he's like the field doctor, in my opinion. I think he's smarter than most doctors I know. And we had a discussion because I changed a protocol a few years ago saying that if you have a stroke patient, we're giving them 500 cc's no matter what. And he calls me up. He's like, Doc, have you lost your mind? and that ended up us having a great conversation. So Andy, I'm going to show the protocol first, and I'll let you make a couple comments. But just so everyone sees where this emanated from, in our protocols, if you're an adult having a stroke, it says right here, give 500 cc's of saline. So Chief Popick, take it away, and then I'll go through the paper.
Okay, so I actually discovered this through the QA process when they started involving the battalion chiefs. And at first I thought the crew had done some poor documentation on indicating that they gave this whole volume of fluid to a patient that otherwise was hypertensive, all the classic signs that we usually see with the strokes. And they came in, they're like, no, that's what the protocol says. And I'm like, really? Show it to me, because I'm also an instructor out of the Gordon Center for Research, Medical Education, Simulation, and Innovation at UM. I've taught for years. I've been teaching this around the country. I'm also involved with the AHA's bridge program with ASLS. So like I typically have done over the years with various treatments and different modalities and protocol formulation is I run it generically through physicians that I have a professional relationship with, both at University of Miami, at the Heart Association, and actually through my federal responsibilities, even with NIH and stuff. And in my teachings and stuff, when I saw this, I started asking systems and connections that I had around the country. I said, what are your protocols for, stroke patients, if they're normo to hypertensive, et cetera, when it comes to volume and IVs, et cetera. And consistently, the discussion was, we just start an IV KBO. The only time we're giving fluids is if they are hypotensive to maintain, perfusion. And so nobody came back to me and said that they were doing anything of this nature. So then I ran it through my physician contacts at the university and at NIH, and collectively they started looking at their access to studies, et cetera. And they came back to me and said, well, find out where the study was based on to see where this might be coming from, because we're not seeing anything. And so I engaged in conversation with Dr. Antevi, and I wasn't quite as dramatic as Dr. Antevi portrayed me out to be initially at the opening, but we have a great relationship. We have for years. I
We
remember
do.
sitting down with him at a Starbucks when he was even thinking about getting into the EMS directorships. And so he enlightened me with the study, and then in discussion of that, it was very clear that the study was done outside the U.S. I believe it was about 120 total patients, 60 of which fell into the catchment of getting the rehydration and the fluid for suspected dehydration. But it was based on an ischemic stroke patient, which we can't differentiate in the field. So my position then was, well, in the bridge programs with AHA and the ASLS, trying to run it up through the chain of, obviously those that are far better educated than myself. And I'm very proactive. I've been on things from the beginning with the stroke programs, stroke alerts, with the sepsis, with the acute, the cardiac alerts, trauma alerts, etc. Sat on many committees over the years, and something is just not making sense here in the sense of everything that we're teaching out there across the country and what's been adapted in the bridge program. So here we are. I was invited to the meeting, and I thank you for that opportunity, and I thank you for the dialogue. So here we
Right,
are.
so Chief,
Tevi, I'll let
so
you.
that was a great setup, and now we're gonna go through the paper, and then listen. We want to poll the audience because we don't pretend to know all the answers here, and I love this kind of dialogue. So Chief, thank you so much for bringing this to our attention. Actually, this protocol started up in Palm Beach County with consult with neurointerventionists there, and then it just kind of migrated down to Broward. So real quick, because we only have 4 minutes left. Here's a study. You could see that they had 2,000 patients eligible, but only ended up with 120. Hold on a second. What just happened there? It was a prospective multi-center randomized open label trial with a blinded outcome assessment, as it's only AIS, as Chief said, age 18 to 85, and an age score of 1 to 18. And here the group either got normal saline at 100 cc's an hour for 3 days, or they got no IV fluid. So again, this is not really a true EMS study, right? Where in EMS you're getting fluids. So what could be the potential mechanisms of IV fluids being beneficial? Well, it expands intravascular volume for cerebral perfusion. An interesting one, again, this is for the admitted patients. They have difficulty swallowing, neurodeficits, and therefore they may be dehydrated even before they end up in your hospital. And then subclinical dehydration may pre-exist and may even precipitate some AIS. Just to note, in an elderly population, plasma osmolarity of acute stroke patients was higher than age-matched healthy controls. And a recent study demonstrated that among patients receiving thrombolytic therapy, dehydration is an independent factor of poor outcome. So just two notes of interest. Here's table 1. And again, this is the characteristics of the IV fluid group, which is the second column here. And the no IV fluid group was the third column here. And you can see that there were a few differences between the groups. In the IV fluid group, there was more males. There were more smokers. There were more drinkers, and the hematocrit was a little higher, smidge higher. I don't think there was a big difference there, and the HDL difference. If you wanted to see some of the actual values that we're talking about as far as how much fluid we're talking about, day 1 oral intake, IV fluid, and then total intake, you could see there's 3,400 cc's versus 1,400. On day 2, 3,700 cc's versus 1,600. So you're kind of looking at double the amount of fluid, and those you see are all p-valued, as you see there, that are significant. And then if you look at the outcomes in the IV fluid versus the no IV fluid group, early neurologic deterioration, you can see here a significant difference. Really, that was really the one significant number that had p-value that was less than 0.05. So mechanisms, this is all from the paper. Mechanisms for deterioration in the non-IV group: progression of infarct because of poor collateral, clot propagation, perfusion abnormalities, And again, here's some other potential mechanisms. And improved hydration status with isotonic saline in the IV fluid group may have averted the insufficiency in the collaterals or clot propagation. So the conclusions of this particular paper were that intravenous fluids are safe for acute stroke patients. We should say acute ischemic stroke patients. Patients with AIS who do not receive IV fluids are more likely to develop early neurodeterioration, not of metabolic or hemorrhagic origin. So if you want this PowerPoint or that paper, because we'd love for you to read it and give us feedback, you can use your phone and you'll get to the folder. Why don't I leave that up there? And Brijesh, maybe you could start the discussion. We'd love to hear from anybody else on the call who has input and educate us. Go ahead, Brijesh.
Thanks, Peter and Andy. That was excellent to go over some of the literature and the data behind it. Yeah, I think it's a great idea to see how some of the pre-hospital care of stroke patients, especially IV fluids, and also I've received some inquiries, on patients suspected to have a hemorrhage. If they have nausea, vomiting, and they're obtunded with high blood pressure, and there's no other explanation, at least in the pre-hospital, whether even hypertonic saline might be beneficial for those patients, just to buy time to decrease possible suspected, cerebral edema from ICH until they get to the hospital, right? Folks that are herniating. So it would be good to see how some of the, this care can affect outcomes once they get to the hospital, even after thrombectomy. I know during the procedure, we frequently give fluid boluses, especially for folks who are in their, like 120s to 140s, just to get their maps up a little bit until the vessel is opened up. So certainly I support, pre-hospital hydration for suspected ischemic stroke. And we can certainly come up with ways to measure the impact.
Awesome, thanks. Anybody else? Any other people on the line who have a comment or, who want to provide us any, because really the question is, if there's very limited data out there, and clearly there's no EMS data, how do we find the truth here, right? Without, if the ultimate goal is to provide better care for our patients, how do we find the ground truth here without, if there aren't any really good studies out there? Does the physiology make sense for or against? I don't know. Andy, what are some of your colleagues at UM, at the Gordon Center, what are some of the reasons for saying no to IV fluids? Do you have that?
So I think in general is that the numbers of patients, it was an in-hospital study. It was diagnosed as an ischemic stroke. Do we really need to be doing this pre-hospital, especially in an urban, semi-urban environment versus rural? Maybe it's better place for rural, but the study reflects starting at 100 mLs, I believe, per hour, the first day up to a total volume of what the study reflected, and then the second and then the third day, and how it did benefit the administration of the TPA, and then the physiology that's going on with the stroke and the use of the TPA. But that's not done pre-hospital, that's done in hospital, and it's showing it over days. So the question is, do we need to be giving the 500 pre-hospital? General consensus with everybody I spoke to, again, this is at physician level, not my thoughts. I'm trying to understand. So if it's a good thing, and I understand what Dr. Etta just said. So I understand that perspective. However, sorry about that. Should in our setting, is it more important to get them moving, getting the IVs, kind of analogous to trauma alerts, where you get moving with the patient unless there's a benefit to delay to get that line for blood or something of that nature, to the hospitals, and then hydrate them or start increasing the fluid hydration once they're at the hospitals, or they're going to CT. We're far exceeding the time limits that are recommended nationally. By far, we're doing a phenomenal job in our regions, and I think in a lot of major urban areas where medical directors and specialty physicians are well aware of what these time parameters, how they benefit the patient. But again, looking at the study and the basis for it, it was in hospital based on a diagnosis of ischemic stroke patient. If we're approaching it as a study to see if we're benefiting the patients, then do we need to be informing patients of the fact that we're doing that? What more should be involved then?
Yeah, no, I mean, it brings up a lot of great questions. Dr. Harris says need to organize a trial. It would include normotensive or mildly hypertensive patients without CHF. So I think that we brought up a lot of great conversation. What I may do here, just because we're over time, and I would love to poll the group, is perhaps I'll send out a little poll after this meeting is over, and people will vote anonymously. But then I think that there aren't many other people piping up here, so again, more than likely people just don't have either a strong opinion either way. Maybe that could be the reason. But I think we ought to keep looking at this question and seeing if we can answer it without having to go through and organize an entire trial. I can tell you personally myself.
So my last comment then would also be pre-hospital. We got everything from 250 or less volume bags up to 1,000 ml bags potentially. And if they are using smaller quantities, changing them out, how closely are they being regulated with all the other things that are going on in the back of these trucks? If they are hanging the larger volume bags, at what point are they regulating it down appropriately? No doubt in a hospital setting, I think the IV fluid administration is much more closely monitored. You've got the team of people that are used to doing that in those type of environments. So again, just a comment.
Yeah, I'm gonna bring Dr. Moskowitz. What I will say to that is it goes back to the same story of what we just talked about with EKGs and other things, which is that things almost never get done that quickly in the hospital. If it takes another 30 minutes, another 60 minutes, and that additional fluid could have perfused that area a little bit better. I mean, that's really the ultimate question for me is, does the extra 30 or 40 minutes you're saving by starting a fluid line in EMS helpful? So Shay, what's your comment?
It's an awesome question. And in the end, I think the intellectual honesty that comes with asking questions is both valuable and humbling. So in some sense, morally, I think it is a great question to ask. However, I will say that there is some work that you need to put into that to make that hurdle made. You have to ask questions about controlling for 1,000 other things that go on. There's a lot that goes on in stroke. So is there value in answering the question? I would say yes. I think that there's utility in asking that question. I think we would have to be aware of how much that work that would take to do. On the other hand, from a physiology perspective, a half a liter of fluid isn't going to hurt anybody. Getting an IV is always a good idea. So I think that's probably a useful thing to put forward, absent having data that's strong and convincing and randomized to tell you otherwise. It's a cool project, but I think it would be a much harder one than, say, the headband study, where there's a very defined in and a very defined out and a very clean picture. There's a lot that goes on that makes the physiology more delicate. So I say we could do that, but we would have to be very thoughtful about how much energy it would take to do that versus just saying this is the most logical thing to do and then instituting it.
Right. The analogy what you're saying is that it's like cardiac arrest research, right? People try to say, is it the type of airway you put in? No, because there's so many other things that we do in cardiac arrest. It's the bundle of care. And how do you isolate a single item in the bundle and then predict whether or not that individual item had the outcome change that you were looking for? So, great conversation. Thanks for the input. Anybody else before we hang up for the day? All right, I'll send out a poll, Chief Popik, so that we'll see what these really smart people on the call all think, and again, see if we can get to some consensus. But thank you so much for coming on today, and you know, for us having that little back and forth, that was really good.
Thank you for having me and hearing me out.
You got it. Dr. Mehta, back to you to close it out.
Hey, thanks, Peter, and everyone. Really, it was an honor to have you all join and learn from each other. We'll have our next meeting in about 4 months or so. If any of you have any ideas or topics, just like today, that you wish to present on, you know, in a journal club format, please email Dr. Antevi or myself. And you know, keep up all the great work in the community. Really appreciate everything you all do for stroke patients. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.